Hello, welcome to video number 12. Hopefully you've seen the podcast that I put on earlier today. This was one that was done a long time ago in a series of podcasts that I like to listen to, but for some reason I never actually listened to that one. And so I thought it would be good to go back to that one because it's not just anxiety that some of you deal with. Some of you, your main problem might be depression. And so it's good to delve into that too, or often the two are together. So if you listen to the podcast, please go ahead and comment on any questions that you had about it, or any favorite parts, or any parts that stuck out for you because in your head you thought, oh, I completely relate to what she said there. The one part I liked, how she talked about how do you know the difference between being discouraged and being depressed. And sometimes when my anxiety was really bad, I would have days where I guess it was probably only just through the spirit that I would know, but I knew there was absolutely no reason for me to feel as anxious as I did that day. This was probably about a year and a half into it when I'd gotten to the point where I was putting things into practice that were helping me feel better and helping me to have a good day. And there would be some days where I would notice, okay, I feel really down right now, almost like I'm being dragged down, and there's no reason why I should feel that way. And so I would get a blessing from Jason. And he would remind me about the fact that sometimes we put a lot of our discouraged feelings or our sorrow or our depressive feelings down to our mental health or mental illness. But it still doesn't mean that you won't have days where sometimes on a day where you have every need, every reason to feel better, that Satan will still not try to drag you down. And sometimes I would have these days where I could literally feel like I don't feel that anxiety is the overriding cause today. I literally feel like there's somebody just trying to drag me down and keeping my head under the water, or just pulling at my feet. And I knew that was Satan that was trying to combat the days where I could have actually had a better day. And so I think it's what we talked about Revelation before, staying worthy and close to worthy to have and close to the Spirit. You'll know the difference between those times where, you know what, I can't do anything at all. I can't do anything more about trying to feel better today. I've done everything I can and I still don't feel good. And I just have to accept that and try to realize that not every day will be this way. Or there will be days where Satan will literally be on your back that day, and at every opportunity will try to drag you down. And so those were the days where I would, in my mind, turn around and say, well, you know what? Blow you, Satan. I'm not going to let you have my happiness today. I'm not going to let you bring me down. I'm not going to let you... I'm in control here. I want a good day, and I'm going to make that happen. And so you can just get out of the way. Those were they're more rare than the days where I knew it was my mental health problems that were making me feel down. But just, I wanted to point it out just so that you're aware that if perhaps there's something that you feel you can do about it, like she said in the podcast, there were times where with her depression, she literally couldn't do anything. But with discouragement, sometimes there's often something we can do to bring ourselves out of that, or ask to be brought out of it. The second thing she talked about, which I will be putting in a future podcast, is something that they've now given a term, scrupulosity. It's quite a newish term, but it basically is religious OCD, to the point where it's about perfectionism. You're so obsessed about being religiously perfect or sticking to your faith. You're so self-conscious about what other people think, to the point where you have to live up to a standard and you feel you can't live up to that religious standard, or that you're not as good as other people are in their testimony, in their faith, in the things that they do. So that is called scrupulosity, and there's a whole podcast that we can do about that I might do it next week even. But it is really eye-opening, especially for those who, perhaps if you're a new member and you come in and you often see things and us through rose-coloured glasses that, wow, you know, they've got it all and they're really happy and da 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 da. Where somebody who's been in the ward a long time may know struggles that go on behind the scenes with those families or those people if they minister to them. And then there are other times where if you've been in the church since birth, you get that pressure to live up to a certain standard, and that can be a really bad thing. And so she talked about how specifically within Utah County, or was it the state? Because there is a Utah County and there's a state, but probably the state. I need to look at that and clarify. But she said that suicide is the leading cause of people, young people between 15 to 24 years old, which we know is the hardest time to stay faithful, because your morals and your standards and your testimony is always tested. Satan will try to get us most at that point. But most of these people, I feel, who are feeling suicidal, these young people between that age, it's not always a case of Satan's trying to tempt them and he pulls them down into roads that they shouldn't be in, because most people don't commit suicide for those reasons. The main reason they are taking their own lives is because they feel there is a standard they cannot live up to. Sometimes I know a leading one is because they feel they're part of the LGBTQ community and they will not be accepted or tolerated when people find out. That's a massive problem right now within Utah, because the expectation, I think, culturally and sometimes doctrinally, absolutely, is that that's not acceptable. Luckily, people are building communities to find ways around that and to foster inclusion a lot more, and also to prevent suicide. But I think probably one of the main reasons, well, not the main reasons, like you see, if you see percentage wise, how many of those suicides are to do with sexuality. And then I imagine there's a greater portion of suicides that are happening literally because of scrupulosity, where they feel their diversity, in the sense that culturally I don't fit in, or my diversity doesn't fit in. I think differently, my testimony feels different, my experiences are different, my skin colour is different, all sorts of things. If they've been through divorce, obviously not 15 to 24-year-olds, unless it's a very, very early divorce. But there's diversity just often doesn't, or even having thinking or feeling differently just can be misperceived as a reason to not stick around anymore. Some people do give them a reason not to stick around. It's not always misperception, but we're trying to do a lot to combat that by getting rid of negative culture, and it's on a lot of people's radars. But that's definitely something that I think we can understand, that when people have depression within the church and they are struggling from self-criticism and religious OCD, that something culturally needs to change. What's gone wrong that this person then feels that they can't talk about how they feel, or that it's not acceptable to believe differently, it's not acceptable to have doubt, it's not acceptable to wear something differently or express themselves differently. So that's a really important point to kind of latch onto and investigate more, I think. The last thing she said that I liked was from Elder Holland, and she said, if you're not going to take the time to become well, then you're surely going to take the time to be sick. Basically, that if you don't put yourself first and you don't get medical help or counselling or the help that you need, because you feel you don't have the time, you will use all your time suffering. And it's just not worth it when things could be improved. It can be a very long road, especially if your depression is due to PTSD. I only ever had clinical depression once, and that was postnatal depression after Soren. And I knew that's what it was because I kind of had a feeling that there was a situation where I knew, hey, in the past, in that type of situation, I would have laughed, I would have smiled, I would have enjoyed that. And it was almost like this, the synapses in my brain were kind of saying, yes, this is a time where you need to laugh, this is a time where you need to smile, or this is a good moment. But that wouldn't translate to my face, where I just, or my feelings, where I just couldn't smile, I couldn't laugh, I just couldn't emote. And it got to a pinnacle, a high point, when one day I was trying to fit bread into the freezer and it wouldn't fit. And I just sat and cried on the kitchen floor. And I remember Jason coming in and saying, "What's wrong?" And I just said, "I can't fit the bread in the freezer." And then I just knew that was such an irrational thing that I had a problem. I was very lucky to have a doctor that listened to me and that cared and helped me get, for me, medication was just like an instant cure because it was a situational and a temporary depression. For those that have it longer than that, it's going to be a long road as far as complete recovery if it's PTSD, a lot of counselling, but don't ever think that that means you will always live with depression. I think that's the important point to point out, that number one, Heavenly Father can do what he wants, and he can defy laws, and he can defy science, and he can help to heal your mind and your body. But number two, the age that we live in and the resources that we have are far greater than they've ever been, and will continue to get better. And so we don't have to ever think that I will always be completely manically, chronically depressed every day for the rest of my life. That's not the hope that the Saviour gives either. So I hope you don't feel that way. If any of you want to look at Jane Clayson Johnson's book, I know you can buy it on Amazon, Silent Souls Weeping. If any of you have book subscriptions like Audible or anything like that, or Deseret Book, then hers is on there as well. But I think it's really interesting because she covers so many different reasons why people have that depression. And obviously that will mean it takes different paths as to how they work to improve that. So put your thoughts on the WhatsApp group, thoughts about the podcast, and anything that has sparked a thought or a revelation or some comfort in your mind. And stick it on there. It would be great to hear you share your thoughts. Have a great week. Bye.